Hello, Jeff.
Hello, Ian.
Did you watch wrestling this week?
I did partake in a little bit of wrestling this week.
I also watched wrestling this week.
I don't care. No, I cared very deeply, actually. That's why we're here.
SummerSlam, watched all 4.5 hours of SummerSlam.
Okay. I'm glad
Yeah.
that you said that because I want to ask you. So I was
Mhm.
watching SummerSlam on a stream of a certain nature.
Sure.
And the stream broke up, a few times and I had to switch a few things around, stuff like that. So when like 12:30 rolled around and I was like, "Oh god, they're just getting to the main event." I thought to myself, "This feels crazy long," but I thought it was just because I had those little bits of technical difficulties in between. Was it
Mhm.
actually did it feel that long?
Yeah, well, it ended after. Yeah, like it was 11:30 ish. No, midnight. It was,
Yeah.
yeah, started at 8. Yeah,
Okay.
like all I know is I was way too sleepy to watch Collision afterwards.
Yeah,
So,
but that could be at like 7 p.m. So
yeah, that's true. I'm actually in a perpetual state of sleepiness.
Well, yeah. It's
It's
all
a
I
thing
see.
that happens when you've given up.
And you reach a certain age or THC percentage,
Yes, yeah.
you know,
THC to other
concentration.
stuff ratio. The THC to other stuff my
Yeah.
body's comprised of is at a ratio doctors call absurd.
They had to make a special section for me.
I was
um,
deemed an anomaly.
but you watched all 75 hours of
I did.
SummerSlam,
Hmm.
and I don't know about you. Overall, I thought it was kind of, I'd give it a mid grade. It was like a 3 out of 5.
I think it would be in any other year or any other period of time, except for the late 90s, it would
Mm,
have been like a 4 out of 5 to 5 out of 5. But we've had
yeah.
such a
Okay.
string of really good WWE pay-per-views that this one felt maybe, not as important
Yeah.
as, well, definitely not as important as WrestleMania, but like Backlash and Money in the Bank felt so important
Hmm.
because Backlash was essentially the Puerto Rican WrestleMania. Like it was awesome.
Hmm.
It like had a very important feel to it. Money in the Bank, you're in London, first pay-per-view in England and forever.
Yeah.
Um, and then this, like it was a big stadium show. You got 45,000 people, so obviously that's going to feel important, but it just felt maybe not quite as
Hmm.
dramatic and fun as Backlash and Money in the Bank, you know?
Yeah. And I have to be honest, it started kind of right away too when I got a look at the way that everything was set up.
Uh-huh.
It felt like they had a very minimal sort of stage presence, and they had these weird lasers that were sticking up and down like behind the ring,
Mm-hmm.
sort of coming out of the crowd as part of the thing. And I found it weird and distracting, and it just didn't seem like, one of the best parts about I always say like best parts of like golden age NXT was that the crowd was right there and you felt like you
Yeah,
were right in the
yeah,
crowd. You felt
yeah,
like you were in the stadium. And WWE has really kind of lost the ability to do that in a stadium setting. They used to be able to
yeah.
do it. You'd go to a stadium and it felt really intimate, no
Mm-hmm.
matter where you were. But as they've sort of, I don't know, neoned out their sets and things like that, the big sets don't look as big and the little sets just look like giant TVs.
Yeah, it was a weird setup. Like, because it seemed like they had to like run through a little S-shaped maze to get to the
Yeah.
ring. Like it seemed
Yeah.
like, you could have like chosen a path and gotten to Survivor Series, like if you had gone the wrong route.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
it was a strange thing too because Ford Field isn't exactly a place where like you need to work around a certain entrance, like at Madison Square
yeah,
Garden or something like that. Like they really could have done a straight ramp if they wanted to, but they chose to do this sort of hook thing that they've done
yeah.
at other places, but I don't know why they chose to do it here.
I mean, it's harder to have that good vibe in a stadium setting.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
anytime that I've gone to a big WWE show in a stadium, you're so far away from everything that like
Yeah,
you're kind of seeing it, but you're watching the big screen a lot of the time too. So it like a very small percentage of people at stadium shows have good seats.
that's fair.
And I think
Yeah.
that plays into it a little bit, you know. Um, but the other thing that I felt maybe was like a step back from what they've done in recent shows was like, don't get me wrong, the main event I enjoyed. I
Mhm.
enjoy every big match having to do with the bloodline angle.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And we talked about it on the podcast last week. They needed to have a big happening that moved the storyline
Mhm.
forward, and they had that with Jimmy Uso turning on Jay. I don't know. I
Mhm.
was surprised when that happened. Like I didn't see it coming.
Yeah,
What
well,
about
I mean,
you?
I had kind of gotten in my, I figured something like that was going to happen. It was just a matter of
Yeah,
who did it. I was
yeah,
like, and Jimmy was sort of my odds-on favorite. The
hmm
long shot would be The Rock, but also
yeah.
maybe Solo Sikoa decides that's his moment and sides with Jay. And then you've got
Oh
Jay
yeah,
and Solo against Roman and Paul, and Jimmy's the wild card, like he can turn the tide in the tribal civil war for real.
yeah,
Or Civil War
yeah.
2, War Harder, like maybe, so I thought, so when Jimmy was like, I thought it was a little silly
hmm
in all honesty, to have him like run out with a hood and a mask on and be like, who could this possibly be? But and it's like, unless they were going to randomly insert another wrestler into the program or Sami Zayn got his elbow drained, I
hmm
don't think that there would have been any other logical person to be under that mask. So
Yeah,
I thought
yeah.
that part was a little goofy, but otherwise I was happy to see, like, you know, him get involved, and the way that, honestly, him sort of turning against Jay and siding with Roman was a
hmm
little bit of okay, all right. Like, I thought that might happen, but I wasn't really sure on that one. So I thought that was cool though. And now they can do Jay and Jimmy matches if they want to until Survivor
Yeah.
Series when Roman comes back and sets up WrestleMania.
I imagine we're getting Jay and Jimmy matches for the next little bit
Mm-hmm.
because, like, or do you hold off Jimmy and Jay until WrestleMania? WrestleMania is a long
Mm-hmm.
ways away at this point. I think
Yeah.
you do the I don't know. We've got Payback coming up in Pittsburgh in like a few weeks. I don't know
Yeah.
if you do it. Do you do the first match between Jimmy and Jay there?
No, I think if I'm going to fantasy book the whole deal,
Yeah.
bro, um, I think that what I would do is I would give Jimmy or Jay an opportunity at something.
Uh-huh.
Maybe are there SmackDown or Raw, or do we care anymore
Oh, what the titles?
in terms of what show they're on?
Oh, I have no idea. I
You know what I
think
mean?
they're both on
So
on SmackDown, but it doesn't
yeah,
matter.
okay. So like you could have Jimmy say be the next challenger for Seth Rollins.
Yeah.
Or Jay. You can have either one of them, and then the other one costs them that match. And you can
Yeah.
kind of play with that back and forth a little bit. Maybe there's a multi-man match, like a Survivor Series match. You can
Yeah.
get them in the ring without giving away that first one-on-one altercation, and I think it would be actually a very cool thing to do at WrestleMania, but it's a stretch. Like, there is a long path to WrestleMania, so I don't know how they would sort of keep that
Yeah,
secret.
I don't know if you can drag it out all the way to WrestleMania. I think the idea is you have Jimmy and Jay feud now while Roman goes away for a little bit,
Yeah.
and that's why they're starting the feud between them.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because like I find brother versus brother feuds very hit or miss. Like
Yeah.
I don't know if you remember when Matt and Jeff Hardy feuded, but it just did
Yeah.
not land at all.
Yeah, but also neither one of them was at their best.
Yeah, that's
You know.
true. But like Bret Hart versus Owen was fantastic.
Yeah,
That was
that one
like,
was great. And
yeah.
aside from like fake brothers, like Kane
hmm
and Undertaker, I can't. I struggle to think of other examples of brother on brother.
Well, like the
You know.
Steiners feuded in
Sure.
WCW for a
Okay. Yeah.
bit. I think Booker T and Stevie Ray did. I think any brothers that went to
Yeah.
WCW broke up families.
Well,
Is what I'm,
on many levels. Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah,
But yeah. So like but those feuds weren't exactly like landmark,
right,
memorable moments. You know
right.
what I mean? So whereas the
Well,
Bret Owen thing was.
No, Bret and Owen, I felt that was landmark, but well, I felt anything that Owen did was landmark. So,
Yeah.
anyway, but it's interesting because I was thinking about the idea of how a Jimmy Uso versus Jey Uso match, how that'll factor into their legacy, and it's funny because if you want to say like so and so is the greatest tag team of all time, you first have to determine what your criteria is. Like what are you measuring as the best or the most successful? In a few ways, you have to say that the Usos are the greatest tag team of all time, because if you look at wrestling history, no company has been as successful as WWE is right now, like doing multiple stadium shows a year, just sold for billions of dollars. And the Usos are right smack dab in the top program. They main evented the first night of WrestleMania. They broke all those tag team records. So if by the criteria of they helped a wrestling company generate money, I think the Usos hands down are the winners of that. Now, if you want to do other criteria, like who had the most exciting matches, you might decide, hey, it's the Rock and Roll Express or the Young Bucks, or, and other criteria like the Outsiders in a way sort of have a claim to that.
They made quite the impact.
They made quite the impact, really, like changed the business. They formed as a tag team, and in the months that preceded, the entire business was way different. So that, so now you have the Jimmy and Jey Uso, greatest tag team of all time. Where does their legacy go from here? And I mean, I think this is the start of them as singles wrestlers. Like, do we, and
I think it's a good time to do that too.
Yeah.
They're both at their physical peak. Neither one has gotten in trouble in a while. So, that's a good thing.
A little bit. Yeah.
It's give it a shot.
Well,
now's the time to do it.
We talked about it last week. Like, Jey Uso is an incredible performer outside of the wrestling ring, like in terms of his promos and things like that.
What's funny? I actually heard someone else talking about his face and how amazing his face was, and I was like, hey, we did that first, thank you very much.
But yeah, I think Jey Uso is a single. Like, I felt that way during the main event Jey Uso stuff. I was like, and I almost thought to myself, I was like, well, what do you do now that you have this knowledge about Jey Uso? Because you don't want to break up the Usos. They're like the best tag team you've had in a while. But like, can you have twins go on separate singles paths? There hasn't been a lot of twins in wrestling, and what twins there have been have kind of stuck together, right? So,
well, I mean, and some may be surprised at this, but look at the Bellas.
Yeah,
they're twins, very look similar. So surgeries come and go, but and they were each able to do singles stuff and make it feel unique. I guess
you still always group them together, though. They went in the Hall of Fame together.
Absolutely, and that's the legacy. But while they're establishing as single stars, you cut one of their hairs, you change up the gear, and I think they could stand on their own. Yeah. If you need to go as far as putting them on different shows, that's fine too. But yeah, I think that they could do it.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be super easy, but I think they could do it.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be interesting though. Like, SmackDown will be really interesting because I mean, they haven't announced anything, but I'm assuming like they'll put up a graphic that says Jimmy Uso explains his actions Friday.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Bognall or whatever it's called.
In Tribal Talk Show.
All right, what else was good about SummerSlam?
Well, we got to talk about Cody and Brock.
Yes, Cody and Brock was like a perfect wrestling match. I loved it.
People, Cody's deal, finished the story. He finished one heck of a story that night. And, the endorsement from Brock afterwards that was, as was said on a post event press conference, which I'm sure is 100% real. That wasn't planned or anything like that. And you know what? Even if it was, I don't care. It still is not something you see a guy like Brock Lesnar do very often. And that's not a knock on Brock. That's just like, that is the respect that it's kind of like in a slightly less goofy way. It's like when Keith Lee came out at the Rumble that one year, and Brock was it was the year that Brock was just and he saw him and he was like, whoo,
big boy.
You know, and he got a big smile on his face. Like, that is like an endorsement from Brock Lesnar. It's like, I'm gonna have fun with you, you know. So you don't see those moments very often from him, and I thought it was really cool that he and Cody had that moment.
Yeah, and you're right. It doesn't matter if it was planned or not, because like Brock would have had to have agreed to it even if it was planned, right? And Brock, you know, he knows he doesn't have to do anything he doesn't want to do, you know, like, and they told him, but I like that moment kind of felt like it was both Brock Lesnar, the character, endorsing Cody Rhodes, the character, and Brock Lesnar, the performer, endorsing Cody Rhodes, the performer.
Yeah.
And it finished like a 4-month long streak. So I thought this was kind of cool. So at Backlash, this is kind of how the full story went. At Backlash, Cody wins, but he wins with like a pinning combo. So he wins, but he didn't like beat the other guy, you know, like
caught him
he
unawares.
pinned him. Yeah. Then they go into their next match, and Cody has an injured arm. Brock wins that one. So now Cody, and remember, we talked about this last week too. Cody's whole thing is he's the baby face that overcomes the odds. So he's just going to keep overcoming the odds until he gets back to Roman Reigns again. And so it was that idea, very similar to WrestleMania. We see him lose to Brock. I mean, he won, but we see him lose, and then we see him avenge the loss, and it makes the win that much sweeter because we know that, you know, Brock can beat him. This was something that he had to improve to get better to beat Brock.
He had to learn from the previous matches. And that's something that a lot of modern wrestling doesn't do anymore, where, you know, like something will beat a guy, and then the next time they face each other, that guy's ready for that. You know, they don't really, they still just kind of, you know, it happens occasionally, but not as much as it should. Like every time you wrestle,
who used to do it,
you know, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say Kurt Angle did that all the time. Yeah, he was great at that.
Yeah. And it's such a cool nuance to wrestling, and adds to that whole like legitimate sport feel. You know, so when you see Cody get by the skin of his teeth, and then, we lost that last one. I guess maybe that was just a fluke the first time, and now he's coming from behind again. Like, you're absolutely right. If there are odds, Cody Rhodes will overcome them. That is his new side business. Need some odds overcame? Call me, Cody Rhodes.
And that story played out throughout the match too. So you had the longer story over the 4 months, but then you had the abbreviated story in the match because Brock is just destroying Cody through the opening moments. It's Suplex City over and over again. So Cody starts to make a comeback. He does those disaster kicks. Then he does a bunch of cutters. And of course he needs to do like 3 of his finishers to beat Brock. That was a perfect story. A perfect story feud. This was a great way to show that Cody Rhodes can be your John Cena.
Yeah, you know? Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And it's a role that he, I think, would relish playing. Like just relish, you know.
No, he wants it so much. You can tell. And it's funny because back before AEW, when he was doing a lot of stuff on the Being the Elite show, and they did that whole Cody saying he's the leader of Bullet Club, and you know, him feeling entitled to be the leader of Bullet Club, and that just that like such a heel, you just want to punch this guy. And so anytime that I've heard, Cody wants to be the true blue babyface, I was like, but he's such a great heel. But it turns out he's a really good babyface too. So, and he gets cheered. He gets cheered. Everybody loves him. You know, a lot of top baby faces get booed by the fans who think they're cool, but not a lot of boos for Cody.
Listen, I ain't booing Cody Rhodes. and I am cool. Like, if you're looking for cool in a wrestling audience, lands right here, baby. I'm a king. I'm not, like, even a little bit. It's all lies. Huge.
Well, a lot of the cool kids were booing Cody at the end of his AEW run. And I think that's interesting now to look back on. Like, you know, what is it that AEW fans were turning on Cody for that WWE fans were like, yeah, we're good with that.
I can answer that.
Okay.
Straight off the top of my head. AEW fans are far more cynical and far more, I'm going to say judgmental.
Okay.
Of the program and the performers than WWE audiences. So you forget, like we're in it, right? Well,
yeah,
sort of. So we might not see that anymore, but to the middle of the road fan who is the majority of the audience for WWE, like, they don't care.
Yeah,
You know, they don't care about any of it. But AEW fans, they care. And they know what's going on backstage, and they make it a point to know that it's going on backstage. And they're harder to impress. That's why it's such a different show, because they're harder to impress. They got to work harder. WWE can go out, and even when Raw was at its worst, it was still 3 hours of TV that the people that complained about it the most watched religiously. You know? So, like, for the most people, they don't care. So, but AEW, they know and they care.
Here's what I think. It's just different things. It's just different audiences. I mean, I'm sure lots watch both, but one way I've summed it up before is in WWE, say Shotzi is your favorite wrestler.
Yeah.
And you watch a match and Shotzi has a match and it's not very good. She botches a bunch of moves or whatever. Shotzi's still going to be your favorite wrestler because you like her because she comes out in a tank and she says cool stuff and whatever. But if you put maybe, and I'm not saying that Shotzi is a bad wrestler or anything, but say like you put Shotzi in AEW and she has a bad match or whatever, the AEW fans are going to be on her for that, right?
Yes.
Whereas that's going to be less prevalent from the WWE fans.
Yes. To put it in chanting parlance, you are much less likely to hear, like, you fucked up when someone botches a move in WWE. You might hear a scattered little bit of it, but at AEW, like, it would be everyone. They'd be right in there because they know the cues, right? So,
you know,
it's just a matter. It's kind of like ECW fans back in the day. The ECW audience was totally different from everything else that was happening. And, you know, part of that was by design, but part of it was also just the passion of the fans and the level of interest that they have in the product.
Yeah, definitely. I think ECW fans is a good way to sum it up. But I have noticed that there are more fans now than there used to be at AEW events who kind of act like they're WWE fans a little bit. And the telltale sign is the what chants. If you get what chants, those are fans who aren't, you know, yelling things on Twitter or ICQ or whatever the kids are on these days.
MSN,
right?
I believe.
Yeah, MSN. And my theory is the what chants prove the existence of the casual fan, because if you go on any like wrestling Reddit or whatever, and it's like, oh, I hate the what chants, they're so annoying, and like everybody agrees, yeah, we hate the what chants. Okay, then who is saying all the what chants? If everybody hates them, who's doing them?
Well, so, I think I've told this story before about the time that I went to see the WCW in Toronto, and I was sitting there and they were playing Goldberg's music and you could hear Goldberg, Gold. And I'm looking around and nobody that I can see is saying the words Goldberg. And I'm like, oh, maybe it's part of the music. Weird.
No,
so there might be some trickery afoot.
I remember that because it was in Toronto. And this was even before the big head kick. You know, very pro Bret Hart, anti Goldberg sentiment expressed there. And I remember the camera showed the crowd as Goldberg was coming in. Nobody was chanting for Goldberg at all, but
No,
you could hear the Goldberg chants.
Canada has never really had a big thing for Goldberg.
No. Wow.
Yeah. And then you wonder, did anyone? Was it all just trickery?
I kind of respect the commitment that Bret Hart has to his hatred of Goldberg. To where I'm like, you know what? Hats off to you, buddy. You're taking this one to the grave, and all right, he ended your career, so you're like, I'm cracking insults for every interview ever since.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think Bret's really hanging in the same circles as Goldberg these days either. Yeah. So chances are Goldberg's smart enough just to be like, I think I'll let that
one go. You know what Bret Hart is doing right now? He's got dungeon wrestling with his two sons in Calgary. They've been running a few shows. Nick Aldis is the Stu Hart Heritage Champion. I think that's the name of the belt. So just getting started. I hope for good things for them.
They did some stuff with the Bollywood Boys.
Yeah.
If I recall, too.
Yeah, well, the Bollywood Boys, they're just from outside Vancouver. So the boys, they're actually really good. They perform.
I always liked them.
Oh yeah, they wrestle on for a promotion called Defy, which is out of the Pacific Northwest. So that's where like Darby Allin and Swerve Strickland and stuff. I think they're the tag team champs for that promotion right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed them boys. In W, and I'm also one of the few that enjoyed them as part of the Jinder Mahal championship run, because I enjoyed the Jinder Mahal championship
I was all
run.
aboard the Jinder train. Hey man, I thought it was cool. I don't care. I
was excited for it because it was totally different. I was like, I did not expect them to pull this trigger. Let's see what happens. And they nerfed it. And that's fine.
Oh yeah.
But I wanted to see it happen.
It was completely out of nowhere. Like he won like some number one contenders match, and then he was the champion after being like,
if I am still coming through, but you are frozen.
Okay. What were we talking about before there were technical difficulties?
Well, we were talking about SummerSlam and our likes and enjoyments of such. And I think the only thing that we didn't get to, okay, so there's two things that I think, two great things about SummerSlam. I liked the women's title change. I thought that was cool. Love me a good cash in. And I gotta say it, wrestling fans, aficionados, and fanatics, we got to admit Logan Paul's pretty good at this stuff.
Logan Paul is good at wrestling.
My
nephew, who sort of, he hasn't watched wrestling in a couple of years, he goes, is Logan Paul on wrestling now? I was like, yeah. And he goes, is he any good though? I was like, he's actually really good. And he is. There's no other way around it. Like his critics will say, okay, but these matches that we see of Logan Paul, like he's practicing these over and over and over again. And my response is, so they're still good. You know, every match you see on NXT is practiced for a week. And I don't see many of those coming out like a Logan Paul match.
No, it was a great match. And like you say, part of the fun of this whole deal is suspending your disbelief. So when you are watching a Logan Paul match, maybe you don't think about that. Perhaps you just watch it and go, wow, that was neat. And geez, they almost killed each other. Oh, wow, that was fun. And then I gotta say, like, I've always been a sucker for the brass knucks because, like, I don't know, like, I didn't grow up on the streets. Okay, I did not have a tough upbringing or anything. But when you see what brass knuckles can actually do to a human face, like, there is a reason that you only see brass knuckles in professional wrestling.
Yeah, basically.
Like, nobody else is like, in UFC, no one's slipping some brass knucks in, you know, like it's just not happening because they will destroy you. So I've always been a big sucker for the brass knucks. And he slid those things into his trunks like he had done it 100 times.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's like one of those things, like, that's one of those things where it's like, you know, the way he did it, he just gets it. He
Yeah.
gets the performance part of it. He got how to make it obvious he was hiding the foreign object. It was obvious to the fans,
Yeah.
but still hiding it from the ref.
Yeah. He
You
didn't
know?
take it to that level that a lot of like part-time celebrity kind of people do, which is the
Mm-hmm.
the big over exaggerated sell or the whatever. Like he
Yeah,
is good at wrestling in the
he
context of
is.
wrestling.
He's good at wrestling. And I actually really enjoyed the finish of that match because that entire match was Ricochet and Logan Paul doing Ricochet and Logan Paul things,
Yeah.
flying around the ring, doing cool stuff. Thought it was a really fun match. But the end, after
Yeah.
all that fancy stuff, just
Yeah.
a punch to the face with
Right?
like what a dirty heel way to win. Like there was two heel things about it. One was the brass knucks, but the other was that it was just a punch to the face. Like
Yep.
after each guy trying to outdo the other one in terms of high flying, Logan Paul, the dirty heel, just says, I just need breath and punch. Yeah. Like for some reason, I found that simple finish after such fanciful match. Yes, a fanciful match. I just thought that was great. That was
Wow, that was
some
abrupt
storytelling there.
Yeah, and it's a very I don't know who helped them put together that match or who agented it, as they say. But whoever it was, like, great job on all three of them.
Oh
just
yeah.
just
Oh
making
yeah.
those moments. The only unbelievable moment in the whole thing was I refuse to believe that any of the color commentators could actually identify someone from Logan Paul's group of friends to be like, "Who's that? They're part of Logan's crew. They're part of." Come on, you barely know which one Logan is.
So it's funny. I watched his brother's boxing fight with Nate Diaz later that night.
Yeah, very few flips in that one. They
Yeah,
also did
very
not
few.
use as many foreign objects.
Well, we don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows what was in those boxing gloves? But I'd never seen Jake Paul box before. Like I just something about the Triller big events has just never appealed to me. But I wanted to see this, and yeah, Jake Paul was just a better boxer than Nate Diaz, and I thought like these guys are just freak athletes. They're just really good at athletic stuff.
They're like Brock Lesnar split in two and turned into huge assholes. Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay.
Oh, it was so funny though, because right at the end of the Jake Paul fight, I'm just scanning the crowd and there's Logan Paul in full gear who I had seen wrestle at Ricochet. And like, I had known that he was supposedly going to show up or whatever, but I didn't expect him. He was in his wrestling gear, like his and just walking around with his vest open, shirtless. And it just looked so out of place amongst the crowd. You're like, normal person, Logan Paul.
It would have
Still
been
in his wrestling gear.
Wouldn't it have been fantastic if he entered the ring to congratulate his brother and then Ricochet gave him a 450 off the top of the cage?
It was the first time in wrestling history that a match started in Detroit and ended in Dallas on the same night.
That'd be yeah. Because the parking lot, the Hollywood Brawl with Goldust and Roddy Piper would come close, but they didn't cross state lines.
Oh no. So, they just covered a few blocks.
Yeah, really.
This is So.
I will say this last thing about Logan Paul though.
Mm-hmm.
How mad do you think Stephen Amell is?
Oh, because you think Stephen Amell wanted this spot?
Well, Stephen Amell's probably like, "Hey, I'm the pretty good looking guy who's an actor kinda that likes wrestling a lot. That's me. Remember me, Cody?
Well,
SummerSlam? I did that." And everyone was like, "Oh, he's better than I thought they were going to be." So I made a show about it, and it's not as good as I thought it was going to be.
Oh, Heels isn't good. Heels has been on my want to watch list for a very long time.
Let me put it to you this way: if it was good, you probably would have watched it.
Oh, damn!
Or you would have had a lot more people urging you to watch it. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like Yellowstone. None of us really wanted to watch Yellowstone. We just couldn't take hearing about Yellowstone anymore. So finally, we're like, fine, I'll check out Yellowstone. And now all we do is talk about Yellowstone.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. I actually didn't like Yellowstone. I watched the first
That's
season of
fair.
it. I was like, the entire show, okay, like there's all these scenic things. And so you'll get these long scenes where it's just a field, and I'm just like, get to it already. Have a conversation, somebody. And then I'm like, if I wanted this, I'd just play Red Dead Redemption, and then I start playing Red Dead Redemption.
That's fair. You know what? That's
Yeah.
fair.
Yeah.
That's fair. Yellowstone filled the Sons of Anarchy shaped hole in my heart for a while, so maybe that's why.
Oh, okay. All right. Is that it for some? Oh, no. So Io Sky, did we
Yeah,
discuss Io Sky winning
we
the
talked about it briefly.
All right. So just real quickly, I have noticed in the past few weeks, um, the timing works out that Mr. Vincent Kennedy McMahon has had spinal surgery recently, and so might not be that involved. And I've kind of noticed a few more Triple H isms are starting to seep into the show. And I'm because Bronson Reed on Raw the other day, they mentioned that he wrestled for New Japan Pro Wrestling. I was like, wait a
Hold on a
second.
second.
This is the kind of stuff that happened during a brief period of time in 2022, the latter half of 2022 there. And then another January 6th happened, but this time in 2023.
This time proving why we can't have nice things.
And now Io Sky is the WWE Women's Champion.
She's WWE or the world?
No, Rhea Ripley is the world's.
Oh yeah, okay, yep, gotcha.
Belts are much better now. I like them much better.
Well, they're a little easier to tell apart.
Yeah. But Io Sky, if you remember, Vincent Kennedy McMahon retired while she was sort of like free agent, like her contract was running out or whatever, but she had always been in NXT.
Yeah.
Then Mr. McMahon retires, SummerSlam, she comes out, Damage Control debuts. Oh, Io Sky's not only back, but on the main roster. And now, all of a sudden, Damage Control isn't teasing breaking up anymore. And Io Sky is the champion. And we're starting to mention New Japan Pro Wrestling a little bit more. And I'm wondering what's going on. If maybe Vince has taken a step back and we're getting a little bit more Triple H in the product.
It's possible. From what I heard, the spinal surgery that he went through was quite it was a major spinal surgery. Like they really had to
I would imagine
chip all the yella off his spine.
Yeah.
But so he's probably on some pretty heavy medication. So yeah, they might have a window essentially where they can get some stuff done. I mean, the sad state of affairs is that tomorrow Vince could just decide to change it 15 minutes after the show started. So it could all just go out the window. But it is nice to see while it's here. It's one of those things where you're kind of like, it's like a new winter, You're just like, this is lovely while it's here, but I know soon it will be cold and miserable.
See, I was a big fan of that 6-month period of Triple H running the show, because Triple H, like, he just has a respect for wrestling that you don't get with Vince. Like, Triple H will do the Vince McMahon playbook of building the big, larger than life superstar, but there's more things that I think he'll hand out to like the wrestling fans. Like, he'll allow them to say wrestling. He'll talk about New Japan Pro Wrestling and things like that. So,
Vince has
hopeful.
always seen it as like entertainment and TV, right?
Yeah.
Like that's always, as they've become more and more neoned and PG'd and public traded and Disneyfied, this kind of thing. And he's given you can't say this and you can't say that. And, it's not a belt, it's a title, and you can only have a title opportunity and not match. And, those kinds of things, they make the product seem way more genuine.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And, or way less genuine. I'm sorry. It's way less genuine is what I meant to say. They make it sound like you're watching a TV show. You're watching a show within a show. And wrestling's not supposed to be that.
Mhm.
Wrestling is supposed to be a live, athletic, competitive event. Like you
Mhm.
remember, promos and stuff used to happen like quickly in between matches at the ringside. Now there's whole studios set up just for promos, and there's that weird wrestler TV watching room where they all watch TV at that weird angle. Yeah. And so, and all these things, and you've lost a lot of the element of the idea that it's a competition. We view
Mhm.
match outcomes as decisions a lot more than we do, actual outcomes, and that hurts. So Triple H, I think, understands the value of presenting it as a sporting event.
Yeah.
It's like tuning
Yeah.
in. It should be like tuning into Monday Night Football. You're going to get
Mhm.
uh, color commentary. You're going to get athleticism. You're going to get some cutaways, a few little vignettes here and there, maybe to tell you about a player or something, and you get an entertaining halftime show to do a skit in. So you can watch that and be entertained by it, but also be marveled at the athleticism of it. And Triple H brings that into
Yeah.
it, and I think it's great. I wish it would go way like I will say like stop lighting the audience. Get
Mhm.
rid of the padded barriers. Put the steel fencing back up. You know what I mean? Like give me that stuff because that's the real like gritty stuff that people connect with when it comes to wrestling.
Yeah. I think and another thing about Triple H is he doesn't pretend that WWE is the only wrestling company.
Yeah.
Like Vince always wants WWE to be something different. Like they're not
Mhm.
wrestlers, they're superstars, right? That's a perfect
Yeah,
example.
a
Yeah.
TV show within a show.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not enough that you're acting like a wrestler. Let me tell you what I would call the wrestler in my TV show, a
Mhm.
superstar.
And you see that in the TV production too, because you get all these camera cuts, but like the camera cuts only make sense if the camera guy knows what's coming.
Yeah.
Like if the director of the show knows what's coming, and you actually don't get that in AEW.
Hmm.
Like I'm
No.
sure they do a little, but or like let's okay, well try and when they do a superplex, try and do it from this angle or something like that. But in WWE, like they know,
Hmm.
okay, on the Claymore kick, you start at 1, then you go to 2, then you go to 3, and so
Yeah.
it feels more like a show in that sense too, because the way they're shooting it is not the way that you shoot a live sporting
Hmm.
event. AEW shoots things like it's a live sporting event. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got some planned angles, but basically
Yeah.
it feels more like you're watching a sport where anything could happen at any time.
Yeah.
Right?
And, that's the benefit of wrestling being what it is, in that you can
Mhm.
plan for those big spots. Like, let's go, this is going to be huge. So we want to make sure we have a cameraman here by this point in and do that. But for the most part, you can let it play out as it is and let the guys let the guys in the ring tell the stories.
Yeah.
WWE's biggest problem for at least the last, I'll say 20 to 25 years, is that it 9 times, I would say, no, you know what? 9.75 times out of 10, they don't trust the wrestlers that they themselves hire to
Yeah.
perform as wrestlers.
Yeah.
And that's where, you get the micromanaging, you get, producers for scripted promos and things like that. All that stuff that makes it feel less like wrestling and more like a TV show.
Yeah.
And I don't know why WWE has always done that. I mean, I see the downfall of WCW is what happens when you let the inmates run the asylum, like literally.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But like WWE has always been like, we have hired, Killer Cross. This guy is amazing. He's got a look. He's got a built-in. People know him, a fan base. This kind of thing. What are we going to do with him? We're going to put him in a mask and make him do something totally different.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like,
We're going to
why? Why did
this
you hire
wrestler
him?
this wrestler is a blank slate for us
Yeah,
to create on.
they're doing
And
Build-A-Wrestlers in the video games.
yeah. And I don't think there are many examples or maybe even any examples of where that's worked.
Yeah, yeah. Like
But
it's
it's
not like
it
The Rock and Cena were playing hugely different characters on the indies for forever, and they
mhm.
built them. And maybe that's why. Maybe it's their hubris in thinking we made that, so we can make
Oh no, it's
whatever.
totally
But
that. I mean, Vince McMahon feels like he made Hulkamania, right? When in actual fact, Rocky 3 played a significant role
Might
in
have.
making, yeah, so, like he was very successful in the AWA and stuff like that. But like the a good wrestling promoter is just putting a performer on a stage and kind of, determining sort of who wins different matches and things like that. But I feel WWE asks so much of its performers because they're giving them a character. They're also giving them completely scripted lines.
Yeah.
And they're giving that to them on the day of the show. That's crazy.
Hours before the show.
Do you know how hard that is? Like on SNL, on Saturday Night Live, they practice all week for a live show. All week. They have an entire week. And they need the best of the best to pull that off. And guess what? They hardly ever pull it off. That show is terrible a lot of the time. So, but WWE feels like they can ask that of their wrestlers on top of actually having wrestling matches.
Yeah.
That's insanity. Like if you wanted to do structured improv, that's different.
Yeah, totally. And like they could learn their lines and get everything ready and then be walking through the curtain and someone goes, we changed our mind, just wing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like what other industry could that possibly happen?
Yeah. And you always hear these reports about Vince McMahon tearing up the scripts in the middle of the day. And I was like, it's not the tearing up the scripts that's the problem. It's the doing it on Monday afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
You do that on Friday afternoon, and then everybody's got a few days to learn their lines and figure out what to do. Not a problem. But Vince's way of doing things is causing everything to be rushed and done last minute.
Yeah. Well, and he, I don't know if he's just one of those guys who like will do the idea of the last person he talked to. Or if he is one of those guys who, like, if you say to him, Vince, the sky is blue, immediately he's like, no, purple, just because he has to think of something different, to try and top you or what. But like, he's been doing this a while now. I don't know. Like, how does he as a boss let it get to a point where he has to tear up a script?
Yeah.
30 minutes before a show or whatever. Like if I was the person directing that traffic, that would be my questions to my staff. Like, why am I only hearing about these issues that are so bad that I have to destroy everyone's work now?
Well, Vince, it's because you didn't look at the script until just recently. And then you spent 4 hours manicuring your pencil thin mustache. And
damn it, pal. It doesn't wax itself. It's good shit, though.
Yeah, but it doesn't really feel like that's the WWE we've gotten in a few weeks. And I wonder if it's because Vince is recovering from spinal surgery or, who knows what's going to happen. This deal with Endeavor is going to go through and Vince is going to have kind of a whole new role. Like, I'm wondering if Vince decides one morning, well, you know what, pal? I'm going to start getting more involved in this UFC.
I would actually love to see that. If Vince was just like, wrestling's dead, it's UFC for me 100% now. And I'm just like, yes, let me see what Vince McMahon's bizarre, twisted brain can bring to the UFC.
What's your name, pal? Kamara Usman. You're the Oos Man. You're going to terrorize the welterweight division? No, we're going to call it the awesome weight division. I don't know.
that was a studio note.
They would do stuff like that. But, Vince McMahon is a guy who's getting on in years and seems to have a belief that, he's right. Everyone else is wrong. And I'm wondering if he just wanders into Endeavor offices one day and decides, I'm going to start changing things around here. Like, who is going to rein in Vince McMahon if that happens?
Can you imagine if like they're getting rid? I don't know what number of USC event they're on right now, like 372 or whatever. I don't
I think
care.
they're pushing 300. They're in the late 200s.
UFC 300 main event is about to begin. Whatever Buffer Brothers still alive is talking his way through and then this corner, and then suddenly, no chance. That's what you got. And Vince comes like old man strutting down to the ring, and then Shane runs out and tackles him.
I'd love it. I would love more wrestling in any sport, but particularly MMA.
It would be incredible. Like I would change the channel. I'm not gonna lie. I would. I want to see that.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I mean, be a train wreck and possibly the downfall of the sport altogether. But hey, you know what? Might be worth it.
Don't worry. If we've learned one thing about Vince McMahon, it's that he's taking everyone with him. So,
there was so after SummerSlam, there was one thing on Raw that we have here on our list of things to talk about that I thought was pretty cool. And that was at the very end of Raw when everyone just wanted to go to bed. They said, nah, here's an angle. And Shinsuke Nakamura turns on Seth Rollins. And it looks like that's our next program for the world heavyweight title is Nakamura versus Rollins. And that sounds just fine.
Which is another Triple H-ism that you mentioned, I would dare to say. Because I cannot see Vincent Kennedy McMahon being like, you know who we should put in the main event?
Yeah.
That guy in the funny jumpsuit. That makes me laugh.
That was another thing that got me thinking, though, because Triple H is higher on Nakamura than Vince McMahon is on
way
Nakamura.
Higher.
So it's another sign that like not just that the Triple H-isms are seeping in there, but like people who wouldn't get pushed with Vince are getting pushed, and so that's
they're finally starting to listen to the audience on LA Knight.
Yeah. Yeah,
he won the Slim Jim Battle Royal, which I was insanely disappointed to see, by the way, that there was no dancing Slim Jim a la the dancing Cinnamon Toast Crunch at WrestleMania. I feel like Slim Jim should have stepped up there.
Well, I just want to see LA Knight like do these kind of commercials where like everyone is saying like LA Knight is just ripping off The Rock and Stone Cold or whatever. I was like,
yeah,
well,
he's definitely the first person to do
that. It's not like anybody in wrestling's ever ripped off anybody else. There's been like 24 Ric Flairs, and I think Flair was like the 11th.
Yep.
He's the name now. Several Bret Harts, several Shawn Michaels.
Mm-hmm.
So why would we care that a guy kind of delivers promos like he's The Rock?
I'll just say this
good.
about
More people should do it.
Yeah. I'll just say this about LA Knight impersonating The Rock. I like The Rock.
Yeah. Very successful.
No one on my TV has done that in quite some time. So
it's been 20 years. Somebody can copy The Rock and it'd be just fine. There should be multiple Rocks. There should be a whole Rock division.
A rock quarry, if you will. That was terrible.
Nice.
I hurt myself.
That's a perfect dad joke, though. But I was hoping LA Knight, when he won the Slim Jim Battle Royal, he would then get the Slim Jim sponsorship so he can do all the Macho Man like commercials. I think that'd be perfect. And that should be the stipulation every year is you become the Slim Jim guy.
And maybe I don't even know if we have them in Canada, but I don't think I've ever eaten a Slim Jim.
I've never had a Slim Jim.
Like, we might not have them in Canada. I'm not sure, but
maybe.
I've had like a pepperoni stick. That's kind of what it's like, right? I don't know. They were always like, step into a Slim Jim, and it snapped. So I was like, it must be some kind of like breaded thing. I don't get it. And then they're like, no, it's a meat stick. I'm like, what meat snaps? What are you doing to your meat?
We had Macho Man in the studio for like 8 hours, and that was the closest we got to something making sense. Tap into it is.
Let's put it this way. If I'd started a company for creamers, I'd have been set. But Slim Jim's, he couldn't quite get his mind around.
Oh, we got our 10 minutes warning here. But yeah, just on Nakamura. So Nakamura, when I've thought Nakamura is awesome since 2014. That's
Oh yeah.
when New Japan World came out, and I first saw him, and he's like coming out doing this like almost like Michael Jackson, Freddie Mercury
Mm-hmm.
thing, and having these amazing matches. I was like, who the fuck is this guy? This guy's fantastic. And then 2 years later, he signs with WWE, and I was like, that's the weirdest thing because I could never see him performing in WWE. It just seemed like just too
Yeah.
weird. Like, no, he belongs in New Japan Pro Wrestling. But when he came out in NXT, it just all fit.
In
The
probably
entrance.
my favorite wrestling match in history. One of the few that I go back and rewatch multiple times a year. Sami Zayn versus NXT Takeover or something.
Yeah.
Right before WrestleMania. It was Sammy's last match in NXT and Shinsuke's first. And it was glorious.
Oh, that period in NXT, I can't wait until like there's like history documentaries on that period of NXT because it was very important in wrestling history.
Oh yeah.
And Nakamura and NXT just made that brand feel like there's something different happening in here because this guy is so different. And this is a guy who's like winning Wrestler of the Year awards at the time, right? And it felt so so special that it was happening. Then he moves up to the main roster and he kind of gets caught in WWE shuffle like things, right?
And he
like,
also gets caught in one of the most tumultuous times in WWE management in history.
Yeah. But like I remember they were calling him the artist Shinsuke Nakamura, and I was like, oh, that's a.
And they remixed. They added 100% more new metal to his theme song, and we were like, oh, okay, yeah, that was definitely broke.
But the worst, like my Nakamura fan heart was broken at WrestleMania in 2018. Remember, he won the Royal Rumble that year.
Yeah.
And then he goes to WrestleMania. I was like, here it is. Put the world title on Nakamura. Here is a larger than life character, an international superstar, but he doesn't beat AJ Styles. And then he turns heel by low blowing AJ Styles after the match. And then his gimmick for like the next 6 months is that he hits people in the nuts. And I just went like, what'd you have the guy win the Royal Rumble for? Like, were you not going to turn this guy into a star? And I can't help thinking it was just like, all of a sudden one day Vince was like, nah, I take it back. I'm not going with him. And I was like, oh.
Yeah. And that match itself too, I remember it was very underwhelming and disappointing for a lot of people because that was like a dream match because they'd had such incredible rivalries in Japan and stuff. And after that, he never really recovered. He was doing the only other thing he did of note was he was the Intercontinental Champion for a while, kind of placeholdering that, unfortunately. And then Rick Boogs played guitar to his theme song. Which I'm never upset with more Rick Boogs, but it seemed a little beneath Shinsuke,
except for during that 6-month period when Triple H was running the show. And Triple H also allowed Nakamura to go out and do the Great Muda's final match during that period. And that was really cool. And so it's like, all right, here we go. It's Nakamura time. And then Vince comes back. But now all of a sudden, Nakamura's in a world title picture. Io Sky is the champion. It's like, wait a second here. What's going on? So, I mean, we'll see. We'll see if it's just he's held up from the spinal surgery.
Maybe. You know what one always blew my mind that never caught on the main roster, really? Was Kairi Sane.
Oh, Kairi Sane. She's coming back.
Yeah. Good. She's amazing. And her whole like Sky Pirate thing, I'm like, this is tailor-made for the WWE main roster, but they never really pulled the trigger on it.
Yeah, so here's another possible Triple H thing. Kairi left.
Yeah.
She went back to Japan. She went to Stardom. It's just come out that she's coming back to WWE.
Triple H-ism.
Triple H pushed her hard in NXT. Vince didn't push her hard on the main roster, and now she's coming back.
This is what has me worried because Triple H did not push me at all in NXT. So, like, I feel like I'm being set up to fail on the main
I don't
roster.
know, man. I think Vince is going to give you a really outlandish character that you can get. But I think you're more Vince's taste than Triple H's.
I found this written on a piece of paper, stuffed in an old envelope that I was clearing out for reasons. It just says Fang McFrost. So that's your thing.
That's
now.
you now.
You'll have to change your ID and everything.
All right. We're down to 4 minutes left, and I really wanted to give a little spiel about CM Punk wearing a shirt supporting trans rights.
Uh-oh.
Are you frozen? Oh, no. Zoom did not want me to talk about CM Punk's shirt in Greenville, South Carolina.
Oh,
I can hear you. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Are we back?
Yeah, you froze on me. Okay, cool.
Oh, okay.
But we're back now.
So on Collision this week, which everybody watched on Sunday because SummerSlam was long, he came out with a like shirt with the trans flag but also the CM Punk fists. So, we've seen him do a lot of support for the trans community since he's been back specifically. And I don't know what goes on in Greenville, South Carolina, but it doesn't sound like a place that might be overly friendly to some issues. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. But I thought that was very cool that he did that. And we've also seen him come out with a it was a pro-choice shirt in Texas or something like that, where I come to understand there's been some legal hurdles.
There's been some discussion, yes.
There's been some incidents legislatively wise. And I just thought that was very cool that he did that. But I did want to make fun of him a touch because there was after the first Collision in Chicago. So he's in the ring and he's got this sign, something about supporting trans rights. And he starts giving a speech about how he didn't say like, I understand how it feels, but he was like, I support this because, when I was growing up, I was different because I didn't listen to the same music as everyone or wear the same clothes. I was like, oh, Punk, I really think what you're doing is cool. But are you honestly saying like, well, I know what it's like to be trans because I listen to punk rock, and people who listen to punk rock are also oppressed, just like transgendered people. So I know what it's like. And I think it's just one of those things was like, all right.
I'm sure it sounded good in his head. I'm sure it's one of those things that sounded fine in his head. And you're like, yeah, it's fine. But yeah, if you'd had like an extra 10 minutes to think about it, he might have said it in another way. But like,
well, I mean, I get what he's saying, right? Like, it's not like he's comparing the two, but he's talking about like, other people making people feel not included in society, right? And how it's important to make it so. It just sounded ridiculous when, at the time. But
yeah,
but yeah, the sentiment behind it was like,
no,
this has to be for everyone.
Always been vocal about inclusion and diversity and equality and not hating on people and respecting those that are human beings, so to speak. Like, I don't think anyone, even Punk's most ardent deniers, would say anything different. So
yeah, and I think that's cool, and that's something he shares with like Kenny Omega, right? So even on opposing sides of the AEW Civil War, well, at least everybody supports the important issues, right? We might disagree on how much flips there should be in a wrestling match, but we got the important stuff down. We're in agreement on that stuff.
Indeed.
So it's just how many Canadian destroyers can you have on a show? That's what we got to work out.
1, 2.
Petey Williams could do 1.
4.
Okay.
5.